Story number 1, Focus Group. I was assigned to the Research Triangle Park facility on a Monday in March to monitor participant compliance during a 72-hour isolation segment of a pharmaceutical trial. The compound was a new anxiolytic, Phase-A-Thur, and my role was standard contract clinical observer work. I had done similar rotations for 3 years without incident. The facility was clean, the protocols were clear, and the subjects were screened volunteers compensated at the standard rate. I arrived at 6 in the morning, reviewed the observation station setup, and confirmed all 4 monitoring stations were functional before the subjects entered their sealed rooms at 8. Subject 14 was a 31-year-old male, no significant psychiatric history, baseline anxiety scores within normal range. I watched his vitals on the monitor throughout the first day. He slept normally, ate the provided meals, showed no adverse reactions to the compound. By the second night, at approximately 11:45, he pressed the communication button and reported a visual disturbance. I logged the call and asked him to describe it. He said there was a woman standing in the corner of his room, near the northeast wall. She was not moving. She was wearing a gray dress or coat. He was not certain which. She had dark hair. She was looking at him. I reviewed the video feed from his room. The corner was empty. The room was sealed. No one had entered. I documented the report as a possible adverse reaction to the compound and flagged it for the principal investigator's morning review. Subject 14 remained calm during the report. His vitals did not elevate. He said he understood it was likely a hallucination and that he would continue the trial. I made a note that he seemed rational and aware of the symptoms' probable origin. He returned to his cot and appeared to sleep. At hour 36, Subject 7 called in. She reported the same woman, same corner, same description. Gray clothing, dark hair, standing still. I checked her video feed, empty room. I noted the report and continued observation. At hour 42, Subject 11 reported the woman. At hour 48, Subject 4 reported the woman. All 4 subjects in separate sealed rooms, no possible communication between units, all describing identical details without any prior knowledge of the other reports. I reviewed all video feeds frame by frame. I checked the recording equipment for malfunction. I examined the monitor displays for reflection artifacts or image bleed from adjacent screens. I found nothing. The rooms were empty on every frame. The subjects were describing something that did not appear on any visual record. I documented everything in the observation log and sent a detailed report to the principal investigator at 6 in the morning. She arrived at the facility by 8. She reviewed the logs and the video footage. She did not appear surprised. She said she would consult with the medical director and that I should continue standard observation protocols. By hour 51, all 4 subjects had reported the woman. By hour 59, they had all stopped eating and were spending extended periods staring at the northeast corners of their respective rooms. At hour 63, Subject 14 became unresponsive. His eyes were open, his vitals were stable, his respiration was normal. But he did not respond to the communication system. He did not move. He was staring at the corner. I initiated the emergency protocol and notified the medical team. The principal investigator authorized me to enter the room. I unsealed the door to Subject 14's room. The temperature differential was immediate. The air was cold, significantly colder than the environmental controls indicated. I felt a pressure change in my ears, a distinct pop, as if I had descended several hundred feet in elevation. The room's environmental monitoring system showed no deviation. The temperature readout displayed 72 degrees. The pressure gauge showed normal atmospheric conditions, but the sensation was unmistakable. I approached subject 14 and assessed him for medical emergency. His pupils were responsive, his pulse was steady, he was not in distress. I placed my hand on his shoulder and spoke his name. He did not respond. I initiated the emergency extraction protocol and assisted him from the room. The moment we crossed the threshold, he gasped and became responsive. He looked at me with confusion. He asked where he was. I told him he was in the observation room and that we were moving him to medical evaluation. He said he did not understand. He said he had been sitting on his cot, and then I was there. He had no memory of the preceding 11 minutes. His vitals remained stable. He showed no signs of distress or disorientation beyond the expected confusion of sudden extraction. The principal investigator terminated the trial at hour 68. She cited equipment concerns and structural integrity issues with the isolation rooms. All subjects were released with standard compensation and non-disclosure agreements. Medical evaluations showed no lasting effects. No adverse reactions were formally attributed to the compound. My observation logs were sealed under proprietary research protection. My contract was fulfilled 2 weeks early with full payment. I was instructed that no follow-up study would occur at that facility and that the matter was closed to further investigation. I have not been contacted regarding the trial since my final payment was processed. The facility remains operational, but I was not reassigned there. The compound was not advanced to the next phase of trials. The principal investigator published no results from the study. The incident file was archived under restricted classification, and I was informed that discussion of the trial with any external party would constitute a breach of contract. The file is closed. Story number 2, Custody Evaluation. I arrived at the Indianapolis safe house on the evening of March 14th. The property was a single-story ranch on a quiet street in Broad Ripple, maintained by the Agency for Short-Term Witness Housing. I had conducted 12 pre-relocation assessments in similar facilities over the past 4 years, and the routine was established. I was there to spend 72 hours with the subject, run baseline cognitive and psychological screening, and clear him for entry into the Witness Protection Program. The subject, a 41-year-old male named Robert Kellerman, was already present when I arrived. He had been transported from a federal holding facility in Chicago that morning. He was thin, with the careful posture of someone who had learned to take up minimal space. His hands moved constantly, adjusting his collar, smoothing the fabric of his pants, touching the edge of the kitchen counter as if verifying its solidity. During intake, I explained the assessment schedule. Kellerman listened carefully and then asked whether the house had been cleared properly. Before his arrival, I told him it had been secured by standard protocols. He nodded but did not appear reassured. He asked again differently, had anyone checked inside the walls? I said no, the house was secure. He accepted this answer but continued to move his hands. The first evening proceeded normally. I conducted the baseline cognitive assessment in the living room, working through the standard battery of tests. Kellerman performed adequately on attention tasks and memory screening. His responses were measured and appropriate. Halfway through the verbal reasoning section, he interrupted me. He asked if I could hear the knocking. I paused and listened. The house was quiet. I told him I heard nothing. He said it was coming from inside the walls, a rhythmic sound, slow and deliberate. I listened again. There was nothing. I documented the interruption in my notes and continued the assessment. Kellerman did not mention it again during that session. That evening, I reviewed his relocation materials with him. New identification documents, banking information, the details of his new location in Portland. He signed the necessary forms. Around 9 o'clock, he asked to retrieve some personal items from his temporary holding bag. Among them were 3 photographs. One showed Kellerman at a beach alone. Another showed him at a restaurant table alone. The third was a family photograph from years earlier, before his cooperation agreement, showing him with his ex-wife and daughter. I was reviewing the documents when I noticed something in the first photograph. Standing directly behind Kellerman, partially obscured by shadow, was a figure. I examined it more carefully. The figure was tall and indistinct, but it was present. I looked at the second photograph. The same figure stood in the background, near the restaurant's entrance, clearly visible in the frame. I asked Kellerman who was in the photographs with him. He said no one. He had taken those photographs himself, he said. He was alone in both images. I examined the third photograph, the family one. The figure was there as well, standing at the edge of the frame, partially behind his daughter. I documented the photographs per protocol, placing them in an evidence envelope and photographing each one with my field camera. I contacted my regional supervisor at 11 o'clock. I described what I was observing. There was a long silence on the line. My supervisor instructed me to continue the assessment. He said stress-induced perceptual distortion was common in protected witnesses, and that I should not allow the subject's anxiety to influence my own observations. He said the photographs were likely old, and that I was misremembering their original content. I told him I was certain of what I was seeing. He told me to proceed with the assessment and to contact him again only if the subject became a safety risk. At 11:15, the knocking began. It was audible to me now, a slow, deliberate sound coming from the walls. It moved through the house methodically, from the kitchen toward the hallway, then toward the bedroom. It was rhythmic and patient. Kellerman heard it too. He stood and walked to the wall, placing his palm against it. He said nothing. I checked the windows and doors. All were secure. I checked the basement access. Locked. I performed a visual inspection of the exterior. Nothing was visible. The knocking continued, moving through the walls with a sound like bone striking wood. Kellerman became increasingly still as the night progressed. By midnight, he was sitting in the living room, staring at the corner where the wall met the ceiling. He did not respond to my questions. I asked him to look at me. He did not. I asked him to stand. He remained seated. I placed my hand on his shoulder and asked him to acknowledge me. He did not move or speak. His eyes remained fixed on the corner. I attempted verbal prompts for another 20 minutes. Kellerman was catatonic, responsive only to physical contact, but not to commands or questions. His breathing was shallow and regular. His pupils were dilated. I made the decision to sedate him without authorization. I administered a mild sedative from the medical kit maintained in the safe house and waited for it to take effect. Once he was sedated, I placed him in the vehicle and drove directly to the federal medical facility in Indianapolis, bypassing the standard extraction protocol. The case was transferred out of my jurisdiction the following morning. My supervisor called and instructed me to submit only the standard assessment paperwork. He said no incident report was necessary. He said the subject had been transferred to a different facility and would not be entering the relocation program. He said the file was being reclassified and that I should not discuss the assessment with other personnel. The safe house was decommissioned 8 days later. I learned this through routine administrative circulation, not through direct notification. It was reclassified for administrative use only, with no explanation provided to field personnel. The file on Robert Kellerman was archived and sealed. My assessment notes were removed from the standard database. The photographs were not returned to me. The incident has been officially closed and removed from active case management. Story number 3, traffic analysis. I was assigned to review automated license plate reader data for a 3-county area in late October. The work was routine, quarterly audit to identify repeat travelers and flag anomalies for counterintelligence review. I had been doing this for 4 years. The system processes roughly 8,000 plate reads per day across rural highways, interstate corridors, and secondary routes. Most data resolves into expected patterns, commercial drivers, regular commuters, known routes. My job was to identify the outliers. On the 4th day of the audit, I isolated a white 2006 Ford Econoline van that appeared in the system 237 times across 14 days. The frequency alone was unusual, but the pattern was what triggered my attention. The vehicle was recorded exclusively between 2 and 4 in the morning on rural routes, with no commercial designation and no residential areas within 5 miles of any recorded sighting. The routes showed no logical destination. The van would appear at one intersection, then resurface 30 miles away 40 minutes later, then again on a different county road 2 hours after that. No fuel stops, no rest areas, no toll booths where a driver might pause. I ran the plate through state and federal databases per standard protocol. The registration came back valid. The vehicle was registered to a person whose name I recorded in my initial notes. When I checked the records again the next morning, I verified the name against the state vital records database. The registered owner had been deceased for 9 years. The address on file was a demolished grain elevator outside Newark. I escalated to my supervisor, Robert Chen, at 11:15 in the morning. I presented the data cleanly: the vehicle, the pattern, the deceased owner, the invalid address. Chen reviewed the screen for approximately 90 seconds without speaking. He told me to file it in the standard anomaly queue and return to the main audit. I did as instructed. 30 minutes later, I returned to my terminal. The flagged entries were no longer in the system. I checked my query logs. They showed no record of the search I had conducted that morning. I checked the anomaly queue. It was empty. I checked with Chen. He had no record of our conversation and suggested I might be confusing my work from the previous day. I violated data retention policy that afternoon by pulling the original captures from the backup server using my secondary credentials, which I maintained for archive verification. I confirmed the van had been recorded. The timestamps, however, displayed corrupted metadata. The dates were inconsistent: 2002, 2017, 2031. The times remained consistent, always between 2 and 4 in the morning, but the years made no logical sense. The system had been operational since 2012. I did not report this discrepancy. Instead, I began monitoring the ALPR feed directly each night, cross-referencing the live data against the backup archives. The van appeared again on the 16th night. It was recorded at the intersection of County Road 40, 1 and State Route 16 at 2:23 in the morning. I made a decision that violated multiple protocols. I drove to that location. I arrived at the intersection at 2:15 in the morning. The road was empty. I waited in my vehicle with the engine off. At 2:23, The white Econoline van passed through the intersection. I saw it clearly. The streetlight reflected off the windshield. I could see the interior of the cab. There was no driver visible. The steering wheel was unoccupied. The vehicle moved through the intersection at approximately 35 miles per hour and continued north on County Road 40. Until the taillights disappeared beyond the tree line. I did not follow. I sat in the intersection for 23 minutes, then drove back to Columbus. The next morning, I submitted a manual request to have the vehicle classification reclassified as Data Artifact Sensor Malfunction, with a notation that the ALPR unit at the County Road 40 intersection had been experiencing intermittent calibration errors. The request was approved without comment or follow-up review. The flagged entries were permanently archived and removed from active circulation. 3 days later, I was called into the administrative office. I was reassigned to Maritime Freight Analysis, a division that operates out of a different floor in the same building. My access to the ALPR system was permanently revoked for workflow optimization. No explanation was provided. No appeal process was offered. The reassignment was effective immediately. I have not accessed the ALPR database in 8 months. The van has not appeared in any system I can reach, but twice I have seen it on my own commute, always in my rearview mirror, always between 2 and 4 in the morning. When I check the mirror again, it is gone. I no longer drive during those hours. The incident has been classified as resolved. The file was archived on 2020 for January 15th. My original query logs were deleted per standard protocol for data artifacts. The vehicle has been officially removed from all active surveillance databases and flagged as non-viable for future analysis. The matter is closed.